Okay, guys, so this video is going to be on how to draw the mouth. Remember, we're doing everything individually. If you wanted, because I've had people in the past where they'll take their nose drawing, so they'll go back to like this one originally, and they'll continue drawing the mouth on that. If you want to do that, that's fine. But the reason why I'm teaching them all separate at this case is so that way we isolate those areas on where things are going to and how the detail should be for that specific part of the face. And then I'll show you how to put them all together so that way when you start your final, you guys can get a little bit more of a realistic look, okay? But I have had people do that in the past. That's fine if you want to submit it that way. You know, for me, it doesn't matter as long as you, when you're working on that, if you are going to try to put it to the nose, you realize that when we get to putting it all together, it might change up a little bit as far as how you're going to place it on the bottom of the nose, okay? The other thing I also have to mention is that if you're gonna be combining it, be aware that the placement, the size, things might change if you're trying to make it look like it's going with your particular, you know, original drawing for the nose in the first place, okay? If you haven't uploaded the practices, remember you have to upload the 2 for the actual grade to get the 100. So if you're only uploading 1 practice, let's say you do the mouth with me right now, and you only upload that 1 picture on that one, it's only a 50. So you do have to do a total of 2, 1 with me and then 1 on your own. If I am going to slow for this tutorial, you can go ahead and do the 2 at the same time. So as I do the first step and you have time to do the second step before, well, another same first step, before I do the second step, then you can go ahead and do that. Also a reminder, you might want to write on the side your steps. So as I draw the first step, you can always put step 1 and write it out. So that way you remember the order on how to approach drawing something like this. And then you won't have to watch the video again to get the second one. You can just follow your notes to see if you can do it on your own. Okay, that's just a recommendation, not mandatory. If you'd rather wait for me to upload that video and get it for you, then that's fine. Okay, so because we're going to be working with the mouth separately, guys, I am just going to mention to you that when we put the face together, there will be certain things that I will show you about distance, about how to apply the mouth from a specific distance, excuse me, to be able to get the actual shape look to the person that you're going to be drawing. However, because we're only going to be isolating the mouth only, the first step on this one is going to be to draw the center of the mouth. So when you're looking at your person, and I'm just going to look at myself in the mirror at this point, just to kind of get a more or less shape. But when I'm looking at my shape, and everybody's different, of course, with their shape, they tend to have like this little bump on the bottom of their upper lip, and then it goes up, and then it tends to come down, and then the same thing on the opposite side. It usually mimics. Sometimes we'll have like a little almost like smirk to our face where it's a little slightly different on both sides. When it comes to the width of the mouth, like I said, for the practice, you're going to try to get about the width of your index finger more or less, or even about the maybe your middle finger. That's okay too. You can kind of do something like that. I don't mind as far as the size. If you're having a ruler, somewhere about 3 inches, okay, as far as the distance and the size for the mouth, the opening. Remember that everyone has a different shape. On my lip, mine actually does not have this because I am one of those that suffer from anxiety. And since I have a lot of anxiety and I'm always anxious, I actually bite my upper lip every now and then. And I have like this little, almost this weird little area that's kind of like that skin is gone just because I do bite my lip on that top one. If you guys have it, then you can draw it. You know, this is just going to be a generic shape. Most people do have it. So I'm actually going to, for my generic mouth that I'm going to be drawing, I'm going to incorporate it. And so I'm going to leave that little, but if you want to do it just because you're looking in the mirror, let's say, as you're doing this and you notice that yours kind of has that little shape, then go ahead and apply it. Okay. Now my mouth, everybody has different shapes. Some have them more round, some have them in a V shape, some have almost no shape at all, and it's very, very high. Usually people with very full upper lips will have a very, very little tiny curve, just for the fact being that because they're nice and plump, it doesn't curve down too much. Mine actually has a very deep V. So people, like, if you pay attention to my shape, mine has a deep V and then it kind of rounds off on the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and just follow my shape because I know my shape. You know, I've drawn a lot of self-portraits, so I know what mine looks like. And then if I'm looking at the shape that comes down here, everybody's going to be different. Some people will have little tiny mouths on the top where they'll do this, and then it almost looks like just a line up here. Some people will connect all the way over here. Some people will go halfway, and then some have really round lips and so forth. So I'm just going to draw the norm, and I'm going to go ahead and just connect over here off to the side, just to where it kind of curves down slightly, because that's what mine does. Mine actually disappears a tiny bit. Like if I close my mouth, it actually, like, this part disappears and it comes this way. So my shape of the mouth, like if I'm looking at my mouth, does something more like this. But depending on who you're drawing will determine that shape. So you're just going to pay attention to the contour of whoever you are drawing, okay? So I'm going to try to mimic the same thing on the opposite side. It kind of curves a little bit out, and then it curves a little bit in, and then it disappears slightly just on the outside curve out this way. Bottom lip, same thing. Everybody's different. The thing you really need to pay attention on the bottom lip is where does it start to curve here versus my upper lip. So once you have the upper lip drawn, then it's just taking a look at the curvature. If I'm looking at mine, so I'm going to stop talking real quick. So mine starts to curve, like if I looked at it right now in the mirror, because I have one set up in front of me, it actually curves about right here. Same thing on both sides. So because I know this, then I know that this is going to be just a little bit round. Again, not everybody has that round shape. Some are flat, and that's okay. You go by the contour of whoever you're going to be drawing. When you start your shapes, I'm just doing a generic shape so I can explain to you about the shading when it comes to lips, okay? So I'm going to come up and I'm just going to go like this. Do some bottom lips curve a little bit more? Yes. Some are even more plumpy and they come out all the way. Yes. Again, depending on who you're drawing. But right now, we're just getting a basic shape. So now that I have my shape going on here, I'm going to start the shading. Even before I start the shading on the outside of the lip, I want my lip to already start having some kind of shading. So I'm going to start with the upper lip first. Now we want to make this look like it has some kind of volume to it, okay? Not everybody's going to follow the same type of shading, because depending on the picture that you're working from that you've chosen, they could have more shadow on this side. Remember, I tend to like to pick this side as my go-to for my highlight. So I'm going to just make sure that I put a little bit of gray, because I'm starting with the upper lip first. I'm going to put a little bit of a gray here on the bottom part of the lip. Because my lips, guys, and this goes for everybody, because my lips have some kind of a thickness to it, even if they're real thin lips, they still have a little bit of volume. I'm still gonna go ahead and apply just a little bit of gray on the bottom part of the lip. And then I'm gonna get lighter as I go to the top. So I'll make sure that you incorporate a little bit of transition. Remember to use the side of your pencil. For those of you guys that are struggling with making the transitions look smooth, just make sure that you use the side of your pencil and that you're using the circular motion, okay? So I'm gonna go dark to light, dark to light, dark to light. And then the same thing on this side, dark to light going up. Now, if you have a lip that is very, very round, then you should have a little bit of shadow towards the top, like a dark. If you have very plumpy lips, it should go dark to light to where the lightest part is going to be here in the center. If you're not one that has very, very luscious lips, like they're not very, very plumpy, then they're probably not going to have this little shadow, and it's just going to go dark to light from the top. But depending on who you're drawing, I'm just going to add a little bit of shading because it tends to create a little bit more shadow. Now, Again, my light's coming from this direction, which means that I should have a little bit of a shadow on this side of the lip versus the opposite side. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of a gray just right here. So I'm gonna make this a little bit darker of a gray compared to the gray that I have over here because my light's hitting in that side, not over here. So I'm just gonna darken the shadows on this side of the lip. Now for the bottom lip, again, it depends on how plumpy they are. Are they flat or not? Even if they're flat lips, guys, if they don't stick out so much, you still should have a little bit of shading. If yours are very plumpy and you're the person that you're drawing, like you're drawing yourself, it's a self-portrait, then you do need to exaggerate the shading a little bit. Again, mine are not very plumpy, but they do have some shape. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna apply a little bit of gray on the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply a little bit of gray down here, just slightly darker, because it's like I've said in the past, if it's round, like if we need to give it some kind of transition, so that way it gives the illusion that it's going like this, it goes up and down, okay? So I am going to put a little bit darker of a gray down on the bottom. And then I'm gonna put just a little bit of the gray on the top. Now, if I'm wearing lip gloss and my lips are super shiny, then I should leave some areas that have the white highlight. So, you know, if I'm not wearing lip gloss, which I usually never do, or maybe even if I have my dry lips, just because they're tight and the skin tightens up, sometimes they crack, you know, like, because if you're not putting lip gloss and so forth, they can still have a shine to them. So depending on that will determine if you have a bright white in the middle or not, okay? If the lips are more cracked, which I am going to apply some texture, because whether they're super hydrated or not, they still should have a little bit of texture, which I'll show you how to apply that texture to the mouth. However, if they are a little bit more textured, then you do want this transition to go in just a little bit. Like there's a few little areas that have a little bit darker of a gray. So you can add that too if you notice that your lips do show a little bit more texture. I'm just gonna put a few of them, not too many. I'll probably put like some here, a little bit here. Now, what's gonna really make the lips look more 3D is not just the shading around it, but the actual shading that you're gonna apply to the darkest part. The very darkest part of the lip should be the very center of the lip. Remember when I talked about when two pieces of skin come together, it creates that dark, dark, super dark shadow. It's the same thing when we were doing the eyelids and so forth. If it is a cavity that opens up, like a mouth does, then this is the part where you are going to push very hard on the line and you're going to make a black line to create that shadow. And then you're going to, just like we did with the eyelid, I'm going to lift that transition slowly, especially if it's a closed mouth. Now, if anybody chooses to do a mouth that is slightly open, where you're showing teeth, then this is going to be a different process. If you're showing teeth, you're going to have to draw the outline for each tooth. And it will look funny at the very beginning, but once you start adding the shading that you see on it, then it'll start looking a lot better. People freak out when they first start drawing teeth because it's an outline and it's not supposed to be an outline. But when you start drawing it like an outline, you will kind of think, and I've heard people say, ma'am, it looks like there's mold growing on their teeth, you know, because they only have the outline of it. But that's pretty much the case of what's going to happen if you just draw that, especially around that particular area of the mouth, okay? But once you start adding the minimal shading and stuff like that, you'll see, because I believe the reference that I use every year of my mother, she shows her teeth. So I will show you an example of how to approach that when we start putting the full face together, okay? So this is the version of a closed mouth, and then I will show you how it goes for a mouth with teeth showing. So I'm going to remove a little bit of that white highlight that I accidentally left. Make sure that it matches that same gray that's on the top. Don't lose the line that's supposed to be the darkest point. If you do, go back and darken that line a little bit more and then just extend that gray a little bit. Okay, now we do have texture on our lips. Like I said, regardless how hydrated your lips are, you still have some. You want to make sure that you follow, like you're just going to go back and forth, kind of like what we did, how some lines are long, some lines are short, some lines intersect just slightly, not too much. I don't want to do too much intersections. I'm just going back and forth, and I'm going with a shape. Okay, now on your picture, depending on the size of portrait you're drawing, you might not see some of this detail. So if you don't see it, don't draw it. But you know, I'm gonna go ahead and add it just because I know if I look at my lips. Now, if you're looking at somebody dead straight on, usually they'll curve in this direction, and then they'll curve in this direction, on the opposite direction as it goes out. That just depends, of course, on the person you're drawing, because if you're drawing it a little bit to the opposite side, you know, like you're seeing it at an angle, then you'd see it at the angle. But just make sure that you try to curve slightly as you go this way, slightly as you go that way. If you don't want to draw that part, that's fine. It's not necessary if you're going to be drawing a smaller lip, because this is bigger compared to probably the size that we're going to be doing it on the portraits, okay? So now I want to make sure that I anchor my mouth. It's not anchored. It's just floating there. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the shading that falls around the mouth, because I feel it's very important to go over that even before we end up doing the full face, just because it does make sense for me to pinpoint specific things about the mouth, okay? First off, when we originally did the line, the outside line, I try to keep it as light as I can. If you notice that there are areas that are a little bit darker, like maybe this part of that area, I can go back and kind of just touch very lightly with my eraser, just to make sure that it doesn't look super dark. Because what's going to happen is if I have a dark line, it's going to look like, you know, like the old school cholas where they used to put the black liner around there, that kind of brown color that they used to do and fade it in. And that's not the look I'm going for. I'm going for more of a natural lip look. Now, if you do your makeup like that, just because that's the way you do it, then yeah, sure, draw it like that. But I know if I'm looking in the mirror, I don't have that dark line. So I want to keep it as natural as possible, okay? Now, the shading that falls here on the upper lip, the most important thing that I've ever mentioned, and this you can look at it, and if you look in a mirror, you're going to notice this, that there is always a highlight that is going to go around the entire lip area of a person, especially where the lip comes out the most. So like for me, because my lip kind of disappears right here, that highlight would consist of starting from here, around here, and then for sure right here. I'm going to have that white highlight as I'm doing the shading. So this is very important. This is what makes lips actual lips. When we're being formed in the womb as a baby, when the lips start to form, it's a flap of skin that kind of comes together and molds up, which is what causes that little highlight in the first place, to always be there on pretty much everybody. People who are born with cleft palates and so forth like that, when they get surgery and they have to get their cleft palate fixed, that little scar and so forth will always be an accentuated highlight because it wasn't naturally shaped that way. So these are just things that make us who we are, like as we're being developed in the womb. So we need to incorporate that as we're drawing. So what I usually do for this is, again, my light's coming from this way. So I'm going to start with this little area first that we originally did not add too much of the shading when we were drawing the nose. When we do the full face together, you guys are going to be able to have a quick practice on putting that together, okay? Now, this is where you want to take your time with your shading, because if you are very scratchy and not smooth, and let's say I'm not smooth with my shading here and I end up getting a lot of lines and scratch marks, what is that gonna look like? Does anybody want to try to comment? I know it's recording, but if you want to try to comment on that, if you know the answer, go for it. And if not, I'll go ahead and I'll say the answer right now. Does anybody want to try to take a guess? So if I'm not very smooth on this, what is it gonna look like? You could type it too on the chat if you guys know the answer. Nobody knows? So, you know, as far as the highlight needs to go all the way around here and then as well right here on the very area, the areas where the lip forms. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip that and start the shading on the opposite side. But if I'm not smooth with it, guys, it's gonna end up looking like a mustache. So I need to be very careful. If I've selected to draw my mom, or if I've selected to draw like any female that will take offense, you know, because I'm not being smooth with the shading, then you better not select them, because if you accidentally don't shade it properly, and you're gonna make it look like it's your mom with a mustache. So you just need to make sure that you are careful with that, okay? If you take your time on the shading on this and you just try to make sure that you get as smooth as shading as possible, then you should be fine. You probably won't come into that problem, but just be aware that there is a chance. If you're drawing your girlfriend and you draw her with a mustache and you show it to her, she's going to be very upset, I can guarantee you. So be very careful. I mean, unless she really does have a mustache and she's proud of it and she loves it, you know, you want to just be very careful with that, okay? They are knocking at my door, guys, but I can't stop the video. So hopefully they're supposed to go around. So hopefully they will, okay? So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start on the opposite side. This is gonna be a lot, try to get it a lighter of a gray versus what's going on for the other section. So I'm gonna go ahead and just circular motion. And try to get it as smooth as I can. But you notice that I left the highlights around the areas that are right here, and then also around the actual mouth itself. If you accidentally did not leave it, like right here, I could have been a little bit cleaner with that line, then you can go ahead and use your eraser, like I said, and just lightly take up that highlight if you have to. Hola, and go ahead and do that. ¿Lo van a agarrar otra vez? Okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just take this off slowly. And that way I have my highlights and so forth, okay? Now on the bottom, you still have to have the highlight down here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna leave a space here. Now, usually if you pay attention to the other students, like if you have siblings around you, or if you have and I say other students because I'm so used to you guys being here face to face, but if you have like a mirror in front of you set up and you want to be able to look at yourself, there's usually a darker shadow right here. And then sometimes, depending on how puffy your bottom lip is, you might not see the highlight at the very bottom of this, and you might not notice it until it starts getting up here, because if it's really puffy, then that particular lip is going to kind of be so rounded off that it's going to hide some of that highlight that should be hitting in that area. So just follow what you see. Like I said, I'm just trying to make it aware to you that we have this particular detail. So when you're drawing your final, you need to make sure that you try to follow what you see. And I'm just gonna try my best, like I said, to make this as smooth as possible, because I don't want to make it look like a beard. So I'm just gonna do this. Now, honestly, even if you have a beard, like for boys that are gonna draw themselves, and if you guys have goatees and beards and stubble and just that in general, I don't even recommending drawing the beard right away. You should honestly first do the shading on all of it first before you draw the hair, because that's the way it is. Remember when I went over the eyes with you guys? I told you that the eyebrows were going to be later on, because we would have to do all the shading around those areas first before we attempt drawing the hairs on top. When you start to do the hair texture, when we get to that part of the portrait, you're gonna learn that when I show you guys how to draw that, is that you are going to do first the shading that is the regular shading for it on where things go dark to light, and then you apply the texture on top. So if I was gonna draw and turn this into like a mustache, for instance, I would actually do this first and then go on it strand by strand by strand by strand. That's just how we draw hair in general to get that good texture and for it to make it look real. Now, I do want you guys on this one to practice the bottom of the chin. We're just going to draw a more or less shape. Remember, we're drawing a generic shape. And the only reason why we're doing this is so I can show you a little bit of how we're supposed to shade around the jawline. So I do want you to attempt to draw this. Now, as far as the shape of the chin, I'm going to go over that when we go over the whole idea of how to put things together. I'm just drawing a generic shape. If you want to try drawing a bigger chin, or maybe like where it goes out a little bit more on the chin because it's more of a square chin on the bottom, that's fine. You can change the shape. You don't have to follow my shape. Just be aware that if you have a prominent chin, like if your chin sticks out a lot, then you're going to have to make sure that you incorporate a lot more shading on this side to make it look like, remember how we talked about the ball of the nose and it being round? You're going to have to make sure that the shading on this side of the chin is a lot darker versus the other side of the chin in order to get that illusion. This is why I want you guys to practice this right now. So technically, even though I titled the assignment that you guys are going to have to upload as a mouth, it's the mouth and then along with the chin on the bottom, just as a quick practice, okay? So I'm just going to try my best, like I said, to work on the shading. When you guys do your final, you should slow down and make sure that you attempt to do this a little bit slower. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I go as slow as I can on this. Because I don't want it to look like it's a beard. So I'm trying to get it as smooth as I can. And then I'm going to put a little bit of shading on the bottom of this chin over here. Remember, this is about shadow work. So you just got to take your time, because if you, like I said, you don't do it right, you're going to give this person a beard. And if they don't have a beard and you make them look like they have a beard, it's just going to look off. It's not going to look like the person. Okay, I'm just going to try my best to match the grays and just take it slow and just use the side of my pencil so it comes out smoother. Now, if this is somebody like John Travolta, who has a butt chin, you know, that's what they call those, the butt chins where they have the little dimple in it, you need to incorporate that. So this would be a good time for you to take a picture of this if that's as much as you're going to do as far as for the shading. I can extend a little bit more of the shading because I'm going to show you guys, for the people who do have dimples, of how to apply that. So if you want a reference without that, then go ahead. Like I said, you can take a quick screenshot of it. I'm going to extend just a little bit of the shading here because technically, because my light's coming from this side, this gray should be just a little bit more enhanced, and I should darken it slightly before I move on. But my mouth still looks a little bit like it's floating. It looks a little bit anchored. The other thing I usually cover with my drawing classes is that because this is a flap of skin, you know, with our eyes, we have our tear duct. But with our mouth, when we have that extra skin that is here, that when we open and close our mouth, it's there for us to be able to have that little extra flap. So that way there's no cracking here on the edges. We usually have like this little tiny shadow that is very, very dark. And it just goes really quick, dark to light to the bottom. So it does cast a little tiny shadow that I'm going to apply here. Now, if I compare this side of the mouth versus this side of the mouth, this side of the mouth looks like it's kind of floating there. And this is now anchored to the other part of my face. So this is why you want to make sure that you incorporate it. And I'm going to incorporate on this side too. So I'm going to curve it down just a tiny bit. And I'm just going to go dark to light down. So I'm going to pick up the transition like I said, and it's just to anchor the mouth in general, okay? So I do need to have that shadow on both sides to anchor the mouth completely to my face. Otherwise, it'll just look like it's floating there, okay? So whether you're smiling, it can be a big smile, it can be no smile at all, but you still should have a little tiny, and I probably went too far down on this one. Like I can erase just a tiny bit because it should just be a little, very little tiny curve down and then dark to light, okay? So going back to the chin, if you wanted to do like the little dimples, so like if this was John Travolta, you would have like a little shadow right here inside in the middle. And then, of course, it does have to get transitioned to the outside. So I would just take it dark to light, but he does have a butt chin. That's what they call them, butt chins. So if they have little, or at least I call them butt chins. I don't know. I know they're dimples in the chin, but if you guys want to go ahead and draw something like that, just to kind of practice, because the person you're going to draw has that, you know, detail to them, then go ahead and add it. But it's usually just a little darker. Guys, like I said, if it's a guy who has a mustache, you're going to do the shading first, and then you're going to take a look at their mustache and say, well, how long is their hair? Is it somebody with a mustache that is like little tiny hairs? So I'm going to just follow the direction, because if my little tiny hairs are going a specific direction, then I need to make sure that I incorporate this little mustache right here that goes on top. How far out does it go? You know, do I have to go back and apply some darker hairs on top of that because they have very dark black hair, but it's real thick? Or is it the mustache, like the big old mustaches, like the Mexican mustaches, you know, where they have like the big old bigotes like this, where, okay, now I'm gonna start doing the hair strands after I do all my shading. I'm gonna go strand by strand by strand by strand, you know, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna make a lot darker of a strand. So it really just depends on who you're drawing and what their actual shape is and so forth. And then maybe their bigote even does this, like Mr. Palmenes. If I was drawing Mr. Palmenes, he has his beard and then it goes like this, and he has where it goes up. So I have to go in the direction that the hair is moving. So if his hair goes up like this, which his does, then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna draw that particular shape. But I am going strand by strand, but I don't do this until all of this is done, all of the shading, okay? And I'm just giving you an example. Like, honestly, I would have stopped at just having this, because you guys only need to at least practice this without the mustache, without the butt chin if you don't want, but that's where your practice is to be able to upload, okay? I was just giving you some examples in case some of you guys that know you're going to be drawing somebody like this wants to practice that kind of stuff already, okay? So maybe you can do one practice like this. On the second practice, you can add, if you're gonna have somebody with a mustache or maybe like a little, I forgot what they call them, not the goatees, but what do they call them? When they have just a little hair patch that's right here, the soul patch. So if you wanna do like a little soul patch, because that's the type of person you have, draw it on the second one. Try to concentrate on this for the first, just so at least you know for a fact that you have all of this shading down, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video there.